A data center twice the size of Manhattan. That's the headline that stopped my scroll this year. Somewhere in Utah, they're building a facility big enough to swallow an entire island borough of New York twice over, and I genuinely struggle to picture it. Acre after acre of nothing but racks of chips quietly powering this AI boom we're all suddenly living inside of. Now, me and John use AI constantly, but like most of us as end users of basically anything, I almost never think about what's actually happening behind the screen to give me what I consume. Turns out what it takes is becoming one of the most contested things happening in America and beyond right now, because the demand for compute from the world's richest companies run by the world's richest men is now so enormous it's reshaping entire states. Leaders in old American industrial towns are falling over each other, offering the sweetest tax deals to more land data center contracts. And what their residents get back is not sounding so sunny to their citizens. Environmental strain, higher electricity bills, neighbors suing over the noise, and now a rise in what's being called anti-AI extremism. It's tense, it's a little dystopian, it's also very DPTM. So today we're explaining what data centers actually are, how absurdly big they've gotten, and why they've become one of the most interesting divisive topics we've seen recently. But I'm not wandering the endless aisles of NVIDIA Blackwell chip racks alone. I'm going to need a man who has no problem with RAM prices going through the roof, so long as he can still get ChatGPT to generate a city getting torn apart by giant insect monsters. John, are you ready to get into this water-cooled, tax-subsidized mess with me today, sir?
Yeah, can't wait, Al. Great to be here discussing one of my favorite topics, the new Satanic Mills that are going to start popping up around Australia's outer suburbs to bankroll my habit for putting grotesque hypotheticals to ChatGPT, and I can't wait.
Yeah, when I think about our own use of AI, it does make me think, yeah, I'm not really sure this is kind of worth all the. But for me, it's just the price of RAM that's gone through the roof that's pissed me off the most. I'm not as interested in destroying the planet or the fact that people in Rust Belt towns can't get any sleep anymore because of the constant hum of cooling towers.
Exactly.
I need to put myself in a jar and then send you a picture of it. I think that was one of my favorites recently was when I was at work and I had a little jar of my own lunch in it, and then I ate my lunch and the jar was empty, and then I just took a photograph of it, put it into ChatGPT image and said, can you make a tiny version of me trapped in, or maybe it was you. I think it was you. I said, can you put John trapped in my jar? And it did a very good job of it.
Yeah, it did. I think you might have put me in like my legal regalia in the jar or something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it just makes me think of Lisa Simpson just outside the nuclear power plant. So we'll watch day
it's very.
and night.
It is like that, isn't it?
Cooling tower. You have the RAM, but.
You have all our RAM chip. You have all of our DRAM, but we have the power. Is what we could chant. There's a lot of comparisons between like nuclear power plants. When you read about these data centers, it's like the town doesn't want this. They're afraid of what it's going to do to the local community. It seems dangerous. People are protesting them.
Yeah.
The Lisa Simpson out the front of the power plant is. I think also, just a slight aside, I think that's widely voted the best Simpsons episode of all time. Is that power plant one?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting what I'm seeing in Melbourne because Australia has gone big on the AI boom, and it's already kind of absorbed hundreds of billions of dollars of investment, and people are saying it's basically saved Australia from going into recession, and the government understandably is keen to do that, so they're like fast tracking all of these centres being built, bypassing, using legislative mechanisms to bypass the usual consultation processes, so things are getting kind of rushed through and built really quickly, and people who live nearby are kind of upset and freaked out by it all. And it's interesting too because it's sort of, these are places that are like the Rust Belt towns in the US that were industrial centers before the kind of manufacturing industry went offshore as it did in America. And so they've kind of been, moved into and turned into quasi-residential spaces, but now they're just kind of building these new and even bigger and even noisier, basically reindustrializing those areas and saying, well, you can just cop it again.
Except there is something dystopian about it. Like, I'm not necessarily making a value judgment this early into the episode. I love AI. I'm a Claude subscriber. But there is just something very like Matrix-esque about saying to an old industrial town, I know you guys used to do like steel, and used to employ hundreds, thousands of people, like thousands and thousands of people in this town. But now there's just going to be a whirring center of like computers that are extremely intelligent computers, and it's just going to be manned by like 100 people. It really is something out of a science fiction novel. It's crazy to think about. And
people in the town say, is this going to give us our jobs? Just like the old steel mill did. And they said, not only is it not going to give you jobs, it's going to take thousands of other people's jobs from around the world.
Is that it destroys everybody's jobs.
Yeah.
I think I'd been hearing these terms like hyperscaler, AI data center, for a couple of years, and hadn't really looked into what it all meant. And then there was these stories this year about these data centers that like double the size of Manhattan, which I can't get my head around that. I'm just trying to picture even like what that looks like. If you go inside, what are you seeing? Is it just like lots of aisles of, and I think it is just lots and lots of aisles of computer racks, but just wearing away. But hyperscaler, because this is a word that you're going to hear loads and loads. That just means like the typical cloud computing infrastructure build out of companies like Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services. These are the companies that are building the data set. So the data centers. So if you're a hyperscaler, you're the one who is building this huge physical infrastructure to power the AI boom. And the reason that we need data centers is because ever since ChatGPT launched a few years ago, everybody has decided in the free market economy that this is the next gold rush, and the world is going to need the world is going to love AI. And what does AI need? It needs compute. It needs not just the ability to serve you your insects attacking a city, John, but it needs the training data as well. So it's kind of twofold. You need a huge data center because it needs to answer your queries, but it also needs to train its models, and the models take a huge amount of compute as well. So you've got the hyperscalers that are going, right, build data centers. And before AI, a data center was what you would think of as like servers, basically. So you would think, okay, it's like cloud computing. Where is my Gmail? Where are my emails stored? Where is Netflix being streamed from? That was a data center, our idea of a data center before ChatGPT. And then what has happened is, since the launch of ChatGPT and all of the other AI companies and platforms, is that now all these data centers basically, it's synonymous with AI when you hear the term data center, and it is just a scale that we just haven't seen before. And as you say,
so the big sort of, are they called server farms or server banks?
I don't know if that's the term that they would use for AI anymore. I feel like server farm was what we might have used back in the day before AI. I think, John, you want to be saying hyperscaler and data center.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
At your dinner party.
But it's kind of, this is already existing infrastructure at some scale, and it's just about probably becoming more sophisticated, but also becoming just much, much bigger. Although I do note that the article I read in The Age, Melbourne's newspaper, said, instead of saying 2 Manhattans, it said 6 Chadstone shopping centres, which is a very, very parochial comparison. It's like
10,000 Rundle Malls.
Exactly. That's like There's like, 800 big pineapples end to end. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the states in the US. We'll start with the US in particular because that's where a lot of this is happening. So yeah, it's this really interesting thing where these old Rust Belt towns that used to be, they were in the industrial heartland of the US, steel, coal, manufacturing, automotive. All that's been drifting out of the United States basically since the 1950s. Everybody knows that they're not really competing on the world stage anymore with manufacturing. And so now these towns have an opportunity to get data centers in because they have like land they can put them on. I'm assuming that there's like old factories and stuff, or old factory towns that have a lot of space around them where you could put one of these data centers. And so the incentives for the states themselves is they get a huge amount of property tax, although, because if you put a data center there, they're going to have to pay property tax for as long as the data center is there. However, one of the criticisms of this whole data center build out is that, of course, the hyperscalers are shopping around. They go to all the states and they say, hey, what are you going to do for us? And one of the incentives is that the local governments and the states say, okay, we'll delay property tax for you. Like you don't have to pay it for blah, blah, blah. So basically the local residents are already saying, hey, we're getting screwed because you're putting this data center in and we're not even getting any fucking tax revenue for it yet.
Yeah.
Then the states will claim, oh, it's going to bring loads of jobs, but in reality, most of the jobs come from the actual construction of the data center, which is temporary. And there's like the statistics of how many people you actually need to run one of these things is kind of staggering because which is kind of obvious, isn't it? Because isn't that the whole point of this whole AI thing? Is it's meant to reduce labor, so you can have these huge data centers, and there's like stats that at the end of the day they might employ like 150 to like 500 people for the biggest one, which is nothing like an old industrial town and the amount of people that would live in that town and work in factories. Yeah.
Well, imagine like a landmass that's twice the size of Manhattan with just like 100 people wandering around on it. It's kind of a wasteland of just whirring servers, which is amazing. And yeah, I mean, obviously they're concerned in Australia as well about, I'm sure this is true in America, but I've been reading more about what's happening here, but, about the kind of energy and water consumption of some of these places. And so, because a lot of them are still apparently reliant on massive diesel generators, but also they're probably likely to rely on local energy production. And so they're, some people are saying, well, let's have a moratorium on new data centers until we know how we're going to actually power them and whether it's going to affect everyone else's property prices because it's just, placing a massive demand on energy production. Like the one that's six times the size of Chadstones shopping centre, if you can even imagine that. I'm sure you've all been to Chadstones, and for your Just Jeans or your Cotton On or your Supre, so there's 6 of those, and it is going to take more energy than is produced currently by Victoria's largest power plant. So it's a huge amount of energy that this thing is sucking up, and these companies are sort of making assurances that we'll find ways to kind of self power these centers, to an extent, and to offset the use of resources, but it's all pretty muddy and they're kind of going up quicker than any of these assurances are being set in stone, which I think is giving people the heebies. But the kind of just the noise is kind of an amazing thing. Like when you think, well, I don't know whether they can make them. I'm sure they're kind of looking into trying to make them as cause as little disruption as possible. But apparently they're just kind of producing just a 24-hour buzzing sound in areas that are often kind of under, because they're building in sort of semi-industrial areas or in the outskirts of Melbourne that are already under airport flight paths and things like that. So people are sort of stretched. And DPTM, friend of the show, Dargle Dan, my brother, was telling me that people in that there's evidence that people in those areas where there's kind of constant industrial noise, or say the noise of planes flying overhead, they have lower IQs. So we need to worry about that. A bunch of brain-addled people living around data centers.
Just sort of angry low IQ zombies just breaking out and destroying the Melbourne CBD. It makes me think the sequel to classic Australian film The Castle will just be about a family that fights a data center being put on their home.
Totally. I had that exact thought. It's very kind of Castle, this idea of like, you know, the big end of town fighting against the battler. So a lot of these people are kind of from that demographic, but also I'd love to see a kind of fusion of Australian horror classic Wake and Fright and The Castle, where they have to fight. Michael Caton has to fight AI data center brain-addled zombies who are just kind of, their brains are just so shot from listening to whirring 24 hours a day for their entire lives that they've lost the plot.
Speaking of, I was just going to say, speaking of the electricity, John, I have some pretty amazing statistics for you here. So apparently in 2023, which was like the start of this kind of AI boom, because 2022 is ChatGPT, or ChatGPT, as we dubbed it when it came out, because we couldn't remember the acronym.
Yeah.
So 2023 is just 1 year after, and I'm assuming that part of the reason for this is because they hadn't really worked out how to make it efficient yet. But apparently data centers consumed 4.4% of US electricity in 2023.
Wow.
And projections for 2028 range from 6.7 low to 12% high.
Wow.
So the idea that 12% of America's electricity consumption could come entirely from data centers, you would want some pretty big like output gains from that. If you were getting productivity gains, if 12% of the national electricity is being consumed by data centers, you really want that to be offsetting some other industries that would normally consume energy. Surely. That's crazy. And the noise, John, is, it's all cooling. So that hum is, if you imagine, you know, you recently got a new laptop because your old one was whirring away, and the reason your old one was whirring away is because it's got a little fan in it that was keeping the chips cool because it was running too hot, and that's exactly the same kind of thing that's happening in these data centers. There's pipes, I believe, that is much like a PC, I think is called. There's pipes, I think, running through the racks of servers that take the heat away from the chips, and then that hot water is like sprayed into some kind of tower, a cooling tower. It is very nuclear. And that's the whirring that everybody's hearing.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's actually interesting, because I'd never heard. I don't know. I just was like, I don't know, computers make noise. And I guess it's just a bunch of computers together making a lot of noise. But that makes total sense.
Chips vibrate whenever you do a query in them. Exactly. It just moves around in there.
It's the groaning of the AI, just complying with requests day and night. There you go. Okay. So it's cooling and it's producing some sort of, I don't know, I guess there's a kind of, you know, like a kind of old school factory. It's got a big cooling tower that's pumping out steam day and night. Yeah,
exactly. I think the vast majority of is evaporating. And then some of it's left behind, and they have to add coolant to some of it, which is also part of the reason there's been such a backlash, is that it basically creates wastewater, some wastewater. And of course, it's just consuming a shitload of water from local communities. In Utah in particular, I think they have a pretty serious drought. And so people are just going, what the fuck are you doing? Like building this huge data center that's going to suck up all of our water. And yeah,
they're obviously banking on AI being a huge part of how businesses do business in the next few years, which seems like a reasonable bet. But I guess they're banking on that being a sort of potentially a sort of sovereign risk, because if you have to rely on, data centers that are offshore for all of this technology, and suddenly your economy is kind of massively vulnerable to geopolitical risks and so on. Whereas if you've got a data center powering all the businesses in Australia and it's in Australia, then, that's a lot safer. So I think that's part of what is animating governments here to kind of get
data center sovereignty.
Data center sovereignty, exactly. So that all of my requests to give me a graphic depiction of what it would look like if everyone's poo was collected and put into a pyramid, that all stays on shore where it belongs.
Yeah. And you, as you say, like, I feel like a proud Aussie that this was processed, that this request was processed on home soil.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you could make a kind of updated version of that famous Tom Roberts painting with the shearing shed with just Aussie servers. Maybe you could pop some cork hats on the servers and and pop some zinc
cover them in
Vegemite.
Cover them in Vegemite and pop zinc and corked hats on them. People are also really pissed off about the increase in their energy costs because the mechanism by which people's electricity is going up in the US is that the data centers require more energy build out. So private energy companies are going, okay, well, we'll do the build out, but then we spread the cost across the population, which is always what has been done with energy. That's always how it's been provided. And but now now there's this, I think, this huge influx of demand for power. And it's not just entirely being covered by the hyperscalers themselves. It's being passed on to consumers in some of these towns, I believe. And so they're just going like, man, this is just not very good. And so this is the really interesting thing, is there's kind of like this there's like this backlash that is it feels like something I've seen in movies before, where wealthy, powerful individuals are saying, come on, swallow all of this amazing technology that we're benefiting from, but you are not. And you're starting to see people protest, and I feel like I'm watching some movie like 12 Monkeys, or there's just something about it where people with Children of Men, is that what it's called? There is just this there's just this thing where you're seeing people with signs. I saw a great sign, even though I don't really think it quite captured what actually is happening with data centers. I think a man in Utah, I saw a picture on The Guardian of a protest, and he was talking about, I think, water, and he said streams, not streaming.
Nice.
And I was like, I don't think this is about streaming anymore, mate. I think you're like so chuggy that that would make sense 20 years ago, mate. This is about tokens now. You should have used a token analogy.
Token, not tokens.
Yeah, exactly. It should have been. It would be great, like a hippie smoking weed, just going toking, not tokens.
make tokes, not tokens. Yeah, it's true. It does have that really dystopian aspect, and like I say, it feels very much like a kind of weird rerun of the Industrial Revolution. Like you've got this kind of machine smasher mentality.
Yes.
So, these people who during the Industrial Revolution, sometimes called Luddites, were basically against, the mechanization of industries that had been around for a long time. Often they'd worked in those industries and they were going out of business, and, it was all going into these huge mills. That phrase I used at the outset, Satanic Mills, is from a William Blake poem that was written around that time and sometimes thought to be about one of these big mills in England. And some of them were kind of attacked and burnt down, and people would sort of deliberately like put stuff in the machines to break them. In fact, some people who were sent to Australia as convicts were machine smashers, funnily enough. But yeah, you get this kind of that same dynamic, because often they're the same places where they had these huge factories, and now it's like, well, this is going up, but its benefit to that community is much less obvious. And, you've kind of got this dynamic of like people holding up signs and shouting and cops, whatever, outside. And then inside, just this sort of huge whirring fortress with nobody in it. It's so weird. And the idea that like, well, what's the social benefit? And one of the things that's, I think, generating a lot of the protest is people just don't have a clear sense. Like, why does this need to happen? And if it works, like if we build all these data centers, is that actually going to make anyone of us better off? Because it seems like it's also potentially going to just take our jobs and cause a lot of instability and consequences that might be unintended. And then, then at the top of you've got, just people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk kind of chuckling scornfully at these people and saying, "This is for your benefit, you peons."
Speaking of the big tech CEOs and your mention of what's being labeled, John, as anti-AI extremism, in 2026, an Indianapolis city council man who'd supported a local data center had his home shot at with a note reading "No data center," and then days later, a 20-year-old in Texas threw a Molotov cocktail at OpenAI CEO Sam Altman's home and tried to force entry to OpenAI's headquarters, carrying a manifesto, one of your favorite items, John, a manifesto. You've got that whole bookcase that's just full of your favorite manifesto.
My favorite.
You say, come over to my library of crazy man manifestos.
Exactly. This one's signed by the Unabomber. He was kind enough to send it to me. It's true.
His manifesto called for AI executives to be assassinated. Again, isn't this it's like a movie?
Yeah, totally. And you do wonder, like, how long until we have, not that I'm endorsing this, but obviously I'm not, but how long until we get kind of like large scale conflict, or like one of these places gets, set ablaze or whatever, like it's just gonna, and then, when that happens, obviously there's also this sense, like in Australia, that the government is going all in on this because it's, at least in the immediate term, it's generating a lot of investment and potentially tax revenue. And so they're kind of fast tracking it because they know it's going to worry people and they just don't want to have to deal with that, which makes people feel like, well, the government doesn't really have our back. It's just kind of in league with these tech moguls. And, we're just kind of expected to sit back and eat it. But, I wonder how long, like how far the tension can ratchet up before there's consequences, or whether you get like maybe in some jurisdictions, in some states or in some countries, you'll get the government responding to that and saying, yeah, you know what, we won't have any data centers here. And we'll just be dumb and backward and behind everyone else. But that's the price.
There's always, you can always just say, like, if I was a data center guy, if I was a hyperscaler, I would just say, if we don't do it, China will. That's all you have to say, and then everyone goes, oh, okay, well, then we better do it. Then there's also this very interesting thing, John, which is there's no guarantee that this current the current infrastructure which supports AI training and queries, that this is going to be the way that AI, these will be the same demands placed on compute from AI in the future. So at the moment, everyone's just betting on, okay, well, if we need this huge amount of, these models need this huge amount of compute. And so the way that we do that is we have these NVIDIA style GPU chips. That's what we need. And that's just what we've decided we need. But first of all, those racks become obsolete within, they become obsolete, or I think maybe even their life cycle is from something like, I've seen estimates from like 1 to 3 years. But then, but then apparently, like quite interestingly, the hyperscalers themselves, of course, in their books are putting no, they last 6 years. But everybody in the industry's going, no, they don't. They last like 2 at the most. Because they're trying to make it look like it economically makes sense. And then there's also the fact that the actual technology itself, the chips and stuff need to be replaced. There's also the actual data centers themselves apparently also might need to be like refitted every 3, 6, 10 years because they're just not up to code for like the next wave of NVIDIA chips that might be like physically heavier. They might be like bigger, the cooling demands that they need. And then there's all this talk also that open source models of AI may be the future, where instead of me paying Anthropic 20 euros or 100 euros or 200 euros a month for access to their models in their data center, that as the technology gets better, that I could like use an open source model potentially on my own local computer. You know, the Mac computers in particular are getting much better now with their unified memory. I don't know, like I don't really know the ins and outs of how much you can do with local compute, but I think there is some suggestion that people, even though an open source model run on your home computer will never be as fast as like a Amazon Web Service data center, if it's free and it's like a little bit slower. And that's also why the big AI companies in America are terrified of the Chinese models that keep coming out, because the Chinese models are these open source free things that China's just putting out there. And all the AI companies in the US are trying to lobby the government to basically prevent American businesses from and individuals from using the Chinese models. So they're saying things like, hey, these are all trained on our data. I forget the word of distilling, I think it is called, where basically it's a technique through which you can take training data some OpenAI and you do a few little tricks and you can kind of steal it basically. And that's apparently what some of these Chinese companies have been doing. So they do this distillation trick and then they go, hey, we've got a really sweet model as well. And guess what? It's free. So there's just no guarantee that we'll need any of this.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I mean, you've talked to me about like the kind of, you know, some people are predicting there's a kind of impending massive contraction in a lot of these industries and companies, that they're kind of, you know, they've obviously attracted enormous amounts of investment and kind of moved money around to make it look like the future is bright and whatever, but they're just hemorrhaging money all the time. And, you know, there's going to be like a couple of winners and a lot of losers, as there always is from these things. And then there'll be kind of gatekeeping that keeps the leaders in that position, I guess. But it's darkly ironic that they are, you know, they're literally, I don't know if you've done any reading about this, because I still don't really understand it. And it sounds so dystopian as to be made up, but it's not, that they're kind of buying up all of these books and just shredding and just scanning and shredding them in these factories, which is so, I mean, you wouldn't believe, it would sound implausible if you put that in a science fiction book. And that, all these kind of dusty old, you know, secondhand booksellers are suddenly getting an order for 2,000 books. They're like, fucking great. All right. And then, you know, and then those books just kind of go out of circulation because they train AI and then they get destroyed, as well as the fact that they're kind of trained on a bunch of people's ideas that are meant to be protected by intellectual property. And then, you know, these same companies are turning around and saying, well, it's unfair for China to be distilling our ideas and our models and reselling them as freeware. I mean, that's a bit hypocritical.
This is one of the arguments, John, is like when these AI companies go, oh, hey, China stole our training data. And it's like, well, your training data stole all of our ideas. Like, so go fuck yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
But the book thing's really interesting, and that also leans into further. That's like another iron on the fire of society being very, very angry at what the AI companies are doing. And just to expand a little bit on what you were saying, so what has been happening is that we're now, you know, almost 5 years into this whole AI thing since OpenAI launched ChatGPT, and all the AI companies are competing with one another to get the next best model. Every time a model is released, they run it through a bunch of benchmarks, and everybody's trying to you know, get the highest score, and they want AI to just keep getting better and better. And as you can imagine, over the last 5 years, what they've been doing is they've been just drinking up the internet. So they've just been sucking up the internet like a milkshake, and there will be blood. And what has happened is they've essentially drunk the internet dry. So they've consumed now all of the most of the information that's publicly available on the internet. All the open AI, all the AI models, all the AI companies have already trained all of their models on what's publicly available on the internet. So they're now seeking new information, new data that isn't on the internet. So what's been happening
to get an
is
edge, I guess.
To get an edge. And so what they're doing is they're finding books that aren't on the internet necessarily, that aren't readily available. Because you can imagine they're not looking for like 1984. They're not looking... they're not looking for classic books because they're already on the internet. So they're finding rare books in bookstores that aren't necessarily on the internet. And then they are buying them, and then they ship them to their training facilities where the books are scanned and then destroyed. I think they're destroyed basically because that's the easiest way to scan them. You slice the spine of the book off and put it in some sort of machine, and then it scans all the pages. And so people are like, great, like classic books that could be sold to a person to enjoy in their home are now just being shredded and consumed by Amazon. And then, of course,
not only that, but like
Amazon's the only person that then has the book. You don't have it anymore. You have to like pay Amazon for it.
Exactly. And a lot of these books, like, they're already not on the internet. So they only existed in the kind of fragile analog world. And now these kind of digital megalith companies are kind of taking the only surviving existence that they have and just kind of swallowing it up and putting it back through, some sort of training module so that it's, I guess what it's doing, am I right, is kind of, because presumably, having trained on the entire depth and breadth of the internet would make your tool pretty good, but maybe there's like, predictive capacity that it has, or I don't know, like in terms of what large language models do, there's just a degree of precision and versatility that it would get a slight edge on if it then gets kind of slightly more information and more variation, because, it's had a look at the internet plus football. It's a funny old game, like the kind of the picture book from 1983 that was only in 5 secondhand bookstores around the world, or it's like it's read 200 gardening books that nobody was particularly interested in from the 1970s or whatever. So it's just a slightly better at predicting what the answer to your question about your camellias will be or something. It's so
They're also now buying data sets from companies that also is just not public. I mean, that's always been a thing, is that you have data brokers that have access to data sets that they've collected and have exclusive access to, which aren't just publicly available on the internet. And so they'll go, okay, here you go. Like we have this whole like medical data set, or, we have this data set about this scientific data set that, I guess is maybe a collection of something universities put together that some data broker may have bought years ago for a sum. And now all these AI companies are just hungrily trying to get as much proprietary data as possible, because it gives them.
For my Upper Deck basketball cards, there's a bit of info on there that they could train on.
Shaq holographic rookie card, scan in, and then shred.
Yeah, shred. Just if anyone has any questions about Anthony Hardaway, it's going to be really good.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like the idea that we don't need these data centers, and I can just run all this stuff on. I mean, talking about AI sovereignty, I want we actually spoke about this in the week, John, because you and I were talking a little bit about how useful AI can be as a kind of therapist, but I don't want to send my deepest, darkest thoughts to OpenAI or Anthropic, because when I want to be Prime Minister or Chancellor of Germany, then some opposing party is just going to get their hands on that data. And so I would
just hack into your ChatGPT and go, why were you asking about your dark innermost thoughts that are deeply sick?
Yeah. They'll just run an ad saying Alexander Holland just eats flowers. My secret shame. I'll say.
Go eat some flowers.
And so, I would like eventually to be able to run these models just locally on my own. It kind of seems like, I don't know, that is kind of the way the world goes. It's like we just get more efficient at things. It's going to be hilarious if there's these like enormous white elephant data centers that just homeless communities move into eventually because we don't need them anymore.
They'll just become like the new kind of abandoned factories of in 2 generations' time. There'll be like an old sugar mill, and then next to it there'll just be a huge data center rusting away. And maybe some clever developers will come along and say, you know what, this data center would make cool loft apartments. We can kind of zhuzh up the server banks so they look like kind of cool industrial chic.
Imagine just sitting over there with a bit of. We could have like the new exposed brick will be exposed NVIDIA Blackwell rack. Imagine just having a little bit of avocado toast next to an exposed NVIDIA Blackwell rack.
Yeah, people say Architectural Digest will go into someone's house in 50 years' time, and they'll be like, "This is kind of original early 20th century server bank."
Just touching it, rubbing it, and just going, "Isn't that beautiful?"
Craftsmanship.
Exposed rack.
Well, that's a silver lining.
Yeah, that is a silver lining. And this is the thing. I'm not saying, I know a lot of people are super anti-AI at the moment, and I can see, every time somebody says something like, "Yeah, there's no utility to this technology, and it's all just being sold to you as a lie." And I am open to that, because there are a lot of people saying, "Hey, is this really making your life better? Is this is this improving the bottom line of your business? Is it making things cheaper, more efficient?" And a lot of people are saying it actually isn't. You're all being tricked into thinking that it is. But I still do things with it every day maybe not every day, but every couple of weeks I'll do something with it where I'm just like, I reckon I would find it hard to live without this.
Yeah.
Now.
And it would be a shame to lose it. So that's the thing. I mean, and a lot of people, and certainly a lot of businesses, feel that way. So, yeah, we're in a bind where we've got to kind of see where this goes. But I kind of like the idea that it might become decentralized as well, as you say, that it might be kind of people who are willing to have, a bit like how people used to have incinerators in their backyards. You just have like a small tower with a few servers in it, just whirring away. And
I have heard, I need to double check this. I do believe that there are now proposals for putting like racks in between walls in homes and stuff like that. People are starting to think very laterally. We didn't even touch on the fact that Elon Musk has suggested that we build a data center in space. Because then it obviously avoids a lot of the problems that we've been discussing today. It doesn't impact local communities. It's very cool. That's part of it. Yeah, it's very cool in space. And so, but yeah, people are starting to suggest,
more modestly, could you build, a nice kind of wellness center on the top of the cooling tower? People could get in, have a steam bath with water that's been run through the surface.
You just turn all of the data center cooling towers into saunas and wellness retreats. You just get a little bit of that steam that's just been been cooled off the tower.
Smells a bit plasticky on my skin, but it's nice and warm.
I think that's a beautiful dystopian note to end on, John. I want to say thank you so much for running through these data centers with me. I've loved understanding what a hyperscaler is, and I'm going to be watching the AI center build out very keenly. And, also be keeping an eye on those Chinese models. I haven't used them yet.
Yeah.
I do have a bit of an affinity for getting things a lot cheaper from China. So, I could
Do the
be
same thing as your kind of off-brand Louis Vuitton bags. You just get your cooling towers
deep seat.
direct from. Yeah, that's right.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, everybody, if you've enjoyed this episode, we always say it would mean a lot to us if you could share it with one person. Maybe you've got a friend who really needs to know what a hyperscaler is or needs to understand the data center build-outs taking place across the Rust Belt of the United States. We're on all platforms. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. And we're on YouTube.
And YouTube, yeah.
And we're on Pocket Casts. We're everywhere. Beautiful. Thank you so much, everybody. And we can't wait to see you next week.
The podcast.
Bah.